according to your office, 76% of Missouri's registered voters are predicted to vote in this election. Is this estimate accurate? And we're talking about over 3 million voters, correct?
Well, it is just an estimate, so don't hold anybody too much to the accuracy of that. What it's based on is what all the local election officials, that is the county clerks and local election officials who run the elections, they make estimates for their own communities, and then we compile those for the whole state. So that's where the 76 came from. And you know, it's not a record in recent history. In 1992, we actually had 77% of the voters show up to vote.
Terrific. I've been watching the Rock the Vote campaign and heard that young voters are coming out in greater numbers. Have we seen that here in Missouri?
Well, of course we don't know yet because we haven't had election day yet, and we don't have early voting in Missouri, so it's a little harder to predict exactly what will happen. But I will tell you the young voters' interest in registering is way up. We've had 340,000 new registered voters just this year. That's in 2008. And of those, 150,000, almost 43%, have been people between the ages of 18 and 24. So that's first time young voters, obviously very interested. So we've also seen one other thing, and that is an increasing interest in younger people being poll workers on election day. Those are the folks that actually are running the elections. You know, it takes more than 20,000 people around our state to pull off an election. And we're trying to get a lot more young people involved in that as well.
That's great. I've definitely seen the enthusiasm here at Homsley. I know that over the years you have worked with leaders in other countries to promote democracy and free elections. And since taking your current office in 2005, you've implemented some new policies regarding state election reform. With all the voter fraud accusations after the last presidential election and the recent Acorn investigation in the news, is there anything you can tell Missourians that will make them feel more confident that their state's election procedures are fair and that their votes really do matter?
Well, their votes definitely do matter. The only way these elections happen and people have their voices heard in our democracy is to get out there and vote. That's what we do in America. So people need to go out and do that. I feel pretty good about our system and our process. There are a lot of steps to it. And remember, these almost volunteer 20,000 people out there that do this once every few years are the ones who run the election. So we need to recognize that they're serving our community, and while we have lots of safeguards in place to make sure things work properly, there are lots of people involved as well. So what we've tried to do in the Secretary of State's office is recruit new poll workers, train them well, and make sure there are plenty of them in a polling place and they know what the rules are.
Great. Can you specifically tell us any of the reforms that have taken place in Missouri over the last few years?
Oh yeah, we've done lots of things. You know, since 2000, that was that famous election in Florida that was thrown into the courts for so many months. There have been many, many changes, and in Missouri those have happened as well. We've transitioned away from the old punch card voting systems and now use these, what they're called optical scan. It's almost like a test you take in school where you fill in the oval and then that's counted by a counting machine. Or you can choose to vote on one of the touchscreen machines that's more like the ATM that you use or something at the gas station, for example.
I remember that from the last election.
But we also have, for the first time, a statewide voter registration list. And that may seem kind of strange, but before it was only ever counties. Each county, elections are run locally, each county had its own list. So if you move from one place to the next place to the next, there was no really way of keeping track of how many lists you might be on. But now we have one list for the whole state, so it's much cleaner than it's ever been before. It's not perfect, but it's really much, much better, and people should feel confident that there are a lot of safeguards in the process.
Right. Can you clear up some of the misconceptions about there's been things in the news that the number of registered voters exceeded the number of eligible voters, and yet there's some logical explanations for that?
Yeah, it makes sort of an interesting headline, doesn't it?
Yes.
But if you dig down and read the rest of those articles, it explains that actually federal law requires voters' names be left on voter rolls if they haven't turned up for 2 federal elections, which means even if they've moved out of state or moved out of town, you can't take them off the rolls if you haven't heard from them. So there is an explanation for why it's there. People shouldn't be that worried about it. They're on what's called an inactive voter list, and so they're on top of what's going on. So you should say thanks to your local election officials and your poll workers when you see them on election day.
We'll do that. Personally, I registered to vote on my 18th birthday because I thought it was pretty exciting.
Good for you.
And coincidentally, that was 25 years ago today, so it's my silver anniversary as a Missouri voter.
Terrific.
And I'm proud to say I voted in almost every election, national, state, and local, but I am ashamed to admit there were times where I wasn't completely informed on every little proposition or local candidate. Do you have any advice to give voters who find themselves sometimes overwhelmed by all of the candidates and issues, that they either stay home or play the guessing game when they get into the polling booth?
Well, absolutely, it's a great question. You know, even my mother, the other day, she had to vote absentee because she was going to be out of town on election day. She called me afterwards and she said, "Robin, what were all those propositions on the ballot? You didn't tell me about those." And I said, "Mom, you're supposed to be prepared before you go and vote." And so that's the real lesson here, is be prepared before you walk into the voting booth, so you don't feel overwhelmed and you know how you plan to vote, because you have more time to think about it. We created this terrific website. It's a great resource and it's easy to find. It's called GoVoteMissouri.com. That's all it is. You can check that you're registered, you can check your polling place, you can download a sample ballot, take a look at that, and get all the history and dig into these things. You can also have reference to a lot of candidates' websites, so you can go there and investigate yourself. But yeah, don't wait until election day to think about what's on your ballot.
Well, terrific. You all have the weekend to study hard.
Go vote Missouri.
As if you don't have enough homework, you can study the propositions this weekend. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Missouri Secretary of State and Chief Election Officer Robin Carnahan, who stopped by to remind everyone to get out and vote this coming Tuesday. We're going to take a break for the music, and then we'll be right back.